Alright you guys, I am back for another Divine Blush video. We are going to revisit the quad. We're going to work again with the blushes and the highlighters, and I'm going to give you a few more thoughts that I've had over the course of the last few days. I've already done my primer, eyeshadow primer, my brows and my concealer, and I wanted to do my base with you so that you have an idea how I apply my base before I go in, especially with the blushes. But while we're doing that, the last few days I've actually been wearing the blushes over bare skin. Like, I couldn't be actually bothered to do makeup, nor did I really have the time for it, and I just really wanted to, you know, put the blushes on my face and see how I feel about the tones of some of them, compare some things, and I can tell you they look pretty beautiful and flawless even over your bare skin. At least for me, I did not find the colors that I have to look patchy or weird over bare skin, which sometimes can happen. By the way, I've had products which especially powder blushes, if they're very powdery, they kind of don't really work well on bare skin because they tend to like stick to places in your face where you have a bit more like oil speaking through and your skin is a bit more tacky. So with these you don't really have that, because even though they're powder blushes, they have a little bit of like that thickness to them. I don't really know how to explain it, like, which doesn't really, you know, result in that effect, or at least not the colors that I have. Of course, I only have 3 out of the 9 colors. Can't guarantee that that's the case for all the colors, but I should have probably told you. I used my Dior Backstage Face and Body Foundation in the shade 2N, and now I'm going to go in with my Hourglass Finishing Powder. This is the shade Moodlight. I will grab a generous amount of that on a fluffy brush and just basically go on this perimeter of my face, like mostly towards the middle, and just lightly here onto the cheeks. I don't really powder the sides of my face very heavily, so what you're going to like mostly have here for me personally is foundation that has maybe sat for a few minutes, but not really heavily powdered face. The next thing I'm going to do is apply my bronzer, and I also wanted to show you that these work pretty well when you combine them with cream bronzers. I have been on a real cream bronzer wave, so I have basically only been using my cream bronzers for the past month or so, because especially towards the summer months there is something about the cream bronzer that just makes me so happy. So I'm going to pull out my Chanel Soleil Tan de Chanel, and I am going to apply that with the Big C Tantic brush that I also used for my demo video, and I'm just kind of going to stipple that here very, very lightly. Now, because the shade of blush that I want to use today is the shade Paradise Venus, which is a little bit more intense and almost like I want to use as a bronzer slash blush, I'm going to apply my bronzer relatively on the light side. For me, I would definitely go in with a tiny bit more usually, but I'm not going to do that today. And now I'm going to grab the shade Paradise Venus, and that is the deepest shade that I have. That is the terracotta, like burnt, like the color of brick pretty much. I think that it will look nicest applied a little bit here, more as a bronzer slash blush. And I'm going to do something which I never do, which is like layer blushes. I don't really have that kind of time in my real life, but I'm going to do it today just out of sheer curiosity. We're going to apply a little bit of the shade Desert Orchid over top of that as well. So I'm going to go in with the tiniest bit of this blush. And I've seen this blush pull a different undertone on people who have like cooler leaning tones of their skin than me. It does pull a little bit more brown and orangey bronzy, which is very ironic because that undertone pulls on people who have cooler tones to their skin and who would probably not want that much brown and bronze on their skin. But okay. I'm going to take the tiniest bit and I'm kind of going to stipple it here over top of that bronzer and see how it immediately makes me look, slightly like I have like a little bit of a sunburn, which is not necessarily a bad thing. I actually quite like that, especially now in the summer. I'm going to apply a little bit on the other side of my face. The other thing that I've been thinking about, especially with those like deeper shades of blushes, I have been looking at a lot of like videos from other creators, and I've also seen creators who have like deeper skin tone than me apply this blush, and on them it looks really gorgeous. And I'm not saying that it doesn't look good on me, but it is quite intense and quite like red leaning. And I was also thinking maybe this blush is just not meant for my skin tone. Maybe it's made in such a way that it actually works very well for people of deeper complexion, but it's not really meant for my skin tone, so I shouldn't really have any complaints if I'm not too happy with how it looks, simply because it's not meant for me. Now, that said, I think for now, for like a summer look, for going for that I've been in the sun and I'm almost sporting a sunburn look, this is looking really nice. You can see that it blends in really nicely with the skin. It doesn't look like a flat matte, it definitely has a bit of a sheen to it, so that's her demi matte formula, by the way. This is the only blush I have in her demi matte formula, and I'm actually really enjoying it. I don't know if it will really work in the winter just because it's so warm toned and so, you know, not going to fit with like a grey dress or something, but I think especially now in the summer I can definitely wear it. I'm going to take my Desert Orchid, which is my favorite of the three that I purchased, and I'm going to apply the tiniest bit of that more here towards the actual apples of my cheeks. Again, going in with a light layer because I already have so much blush on. And again, I'm going to like lightly stipple that over top. And I don't really know if it's really making much of a difference. It's just adding a little bit of like bronziness to my actual cheeks. But I also don't want to overdo it because I already feel like I'm super over blushed. Another thing I wanted to add about the shade Desert Orchid in particular, I mentioned in my original video I did swatches side by side with the Cover FX shade in Warm Honey, and I told you that I was probably going to try the two on my face to see how they look like. Lo and behold, they look identical on the skin. With me slightly preferring the Pat McGrath formula. So what I'm going to do is probably I'm going to sell my Cover FX Warm Honey blush because on the cheeks they look identical in terms of their color. Now I want to revisit the highlighter for a little bit there because I want to go back in time and almost eat my words, because at the very end of my first impressions video I said that the formula on this isn't anything special. And then I thought, you know what, in order to be sure of that, I'm going to go and touch all of my other highlighters. You know what, it's not special when you consider it in the realm of Pat McGrath products, because Pat McGrath products are just so superior. Yes, I'm very biased. But when I touch this highlighter, when I put my finger and I swirl it into the pan, and then I swirl my finger into the pan of a Becca highlighter, this one feels leaps and bounds better. I also added that as an update underneath my first impressions video, just to make sure that if people see that video, they might also notice that I've changed slightly my mind about it. But the formula on this is like silk, and it melts into the skin. You can also wear this without anything else underneath. I wore that together with the blush on bare skin, and it melts into the skin in such a gorgeous way, I can't even describe it to you. Just for shits and giggles, I'm going to try and put one of my more traditional powder highlighters next to this one in front of the camera for you so that you can see them. So this is the shade Sin from Urban Decay, and I don't know whether you can see how much drier and more like a powder this is looking, and this is just like silk poured in a pan. You have to like put your finger in it in order to really be able to appreciate the formula, but it is a really gorgeous formula. So I'm going to take my Wayne Goss brush here, this beautiful blue squirrel brush, and I'm going to gently apply this highlighter here onto my cheekbones. And just the more you blend it into your skin, the more seamlessly it seems to melt into it. It's a really gorgeous formula. I spritzed my sponge with the tiniest bit of Fix Plus, and now I'm just going to, you know, go over the powders very, very gently, just to melt them even better into my skin. And now let's dip back into Voyeuristic Vixen, and for today's look I want to focus a little bit more on these two shades. What I'm going to do is start off the look the exact same way that I did in my previous video, in my first impressions video, which is going to be applying the matte shade After Dusk in my outer corner. We are going to take it a little bit further onto the lid though, so today I'm going to take it like halfway across my lids. To start off with, I'm just going to start laying down the color and then blending it upwards towards my crease. If you find this too deep for your skin tone to start with and to blend out, you can always go back with you can always start off with a somewhat lighter shade and then apply this afterwards. But I find that it blends out relatively easily and into a very beautiful undertone of eyeshadow. I really enjoy the undertone of this eyeshadow. I don't know, people should be talking more about this matte shade because the formula is stellar and the undertone is beautiful. Now that I have blended the color out, I am actually going to build up the intensity, especially here on my lid and outer corner, because like I said, I would like to bring this color like this halfway in. Now I'm going to take a glitter glue. This is my Pixie Epoxy from Fairy. I always work with glitter glue, so I'm going to stick to my usual habits. And I'm going to apply this not only on the inner side of my lid, where I have my bare lid, but also I'm going to take it a little bit over that After Dusk shade. I want to go into the shade Twilight Bronze now, so this gorgeous neutral bronze here. I wore this shade just as an eye look. I didn't really demo that in my first impressions video, and when I applied it over like bare lid, just over the glitter glue, it was quite neutral, quite subdued. Like, it was beautiful, it had a gorgeous sheen to it, but I felt like it would be very interesting to layer that over a deeper shade to see how it behaves. So now I'm going to grab it on my finger and I'm going to start applying that right here over top of After Dusk, and then slowly bringing it also inwards onto the lid, but like leave about 1/3 of the lid free. And you can see that of course it deepens, the tone deepens over the burgundy shade. So you can definitely play around with the tone of this shade by just layering it a little bit over the matte shade. This shade also has a beautiful, very very smooth formula. Like I said, to me this feels like a cream, almost like a putty. This is a beautiful neutral shade, I really really like it. Now I'm going to grab a little inner corner brush, something like this, like small and flat, and I'm going to go into the shade Moonlight Liaison. Moonlight Liaison is a little bit in between one of her more spectacular shades and one of her like skin show shades. It's not quite as boring as her skin show shades, but it's also not quite Golden Polaris from Interstellar Icons. It's something in between. It has a bit more sparkle than the skin show shades and a bit more like impact and intensity to it, but it lacks the dimension that Golden Polaris has. Just applying that here in the inner third of my lid. Now if you wanted to do a super like neutral look or something more on the neutral side, you could definitely stop here. However, I am a little bit curious what happens if I apply the tiniest bit of Rosefire Nectar right here onto this part of my lid. So I'm going to put my finger very gently in this shade and just grab basically like a few flakes, like not full on opacity, but just a few flakes. And it immediately gives a little bit of like that gorgeous like peachiness to the Twilight Bronze shade. Super pretty, without overtaking it. You can definitely go very lightly into Rosefire Nectar so that it doesn't overtake the look, but just kind of beautifully complements it. Lower lash line will be kept pretty simple. I'm going to go back into the matte shade and apply that all over. Okay guys, final look. Just FYI, I have on my lips this shade Flash 3 from her Blitz Trance line, so this is the slightly sparklier version of the Flash 3 lipstick from her Matte Trance, if you're familiar with that color. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what you thought about our revisiting of the Divine Blush collection. I definitely think the shade Paradise Venus is a little too much for me, so I still need to practice to go in with a lighter hand, and perhaps in a year or so, when I've actually been at the beach for a few days and I have gotten a tan, this shade will really work for me. I don't really have anything more to add to what I already said during this video and during my first impressions. So overall, the more I use the formulas on both the blushes and the highlighters, the more I fall in love with them. I think they just look so beautiful and seamless on the skin. And like I said, I feel like one of the conclusions that I have drawn is that the shade Paradise Venus just was not meant for my skin tone, and that is why it's not what I expected, and it doesn't, you know, and it's quite intense on me. It just wasn't meant for me. So I think that's something really important to consider when you purchase these colors, that some of them are meant for people of deeper skin tones. And also the other way around, if you have a very deep skin tone and you're purchasing Flirtatious and Desert Orchid, you should keep in mind those were maybe meant for people of a lighter complexion, so they might not show up as well on you. The highlighter, as I said, mild regrets about calling it not special, because it is actually a pretty special formula. The eyeshadow quad, I really am enjoying the eyeshadow quad, you guys. I think that the quad is definitely one of the absolute highlights of this collection, together with the blushes and the highlighter. To me, the most under the radar, like the products that always fly a bit under the radar when she releases something, are the lip products, unless it's a specific lip collection. With that said though, the Matte Trance she released with this formula, if I ever see it on sale, I will buy it, because it's a peach terracotta and I've seen it on other people and it looks delicious and warm and exactly like the kind of shade that would really like fit my skin tone. So I am probably going to eventually pick that color up. I can't wait to hear your thoughts. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye!